The hedgerows were alive with the hiss of cicadas and the distant rumble of armor. In the fields outside Villers-Bocage, the air stank of diesel, cordite, and crushed clover. Sergeant Alan Burkett of the 13th 18th Royal Hussars wiped mud from his goggles and squinted at the horizon. Through the haze, he could make out the long barrel of a tank gun glinting in the morning sun, but it wasn't German. It was his own, a brand-new Firefly. Just a few weeks earlier, Burkett's troop had been riding standard M4 Shermans, the tanks every German gunner loved to see burn. Tommy cookers, they'd called them, mocking how easily the gasoline engines went up when hit. British tankers joked bitterly that their Shermans were mobile crematoriums. But this one was different. Its long, slender barrel stretched almost absurdly far past the hull, like a spear built to kill giants. Inside was a British innovation the Germans hadn't yet faced on the battlefield. The 17-pounder gun, capable of punching through 150 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. As Burkett's crew loaded in, Corporal Evans, the gunner, ran a hand along the breech. "She's ugly, but if the Krauts show their tigers, they'll get a right surprise." Radio chatter crackled. The order came, "Advance to point 214. Expect armored contact." The Firefly rolled forward, treads grinding through mud and hedgerows. The countryside was deceptive, peaceful at a glance, deadly in reality. Somewhere beyond those hedges, elements of the 2nd Panzer Division lurked, and with them a handful of the dreaded Tigers. By midday, the British column had reached the outskirts of Villers-Bocage. Suddenly, the first Sherman in line erupted into flame. The blast echoed off the valley walls. "Ambush! Tigers at 11 o'clock!" Burkett swung the turret toward the smoke. Through his scope, Evans spotted a massive silhouette, thick armor, broad tracks, and the telltale 88mm barrel of a Tiger I. "Target! Tiger tank! Range 800! Up!" yelled the loader. Evans exhaled, adjusted for range, and fired. The recoil slammed through the hull. The 17-pounder screamed across the field, a streak of tungsten that found its mark dead center on the Tiger's glossus. To their shock, the Tiger halted. Smoke poured from the engine deck. Burkett grinned. Hit confirmed. The British crews, once outgunned and mocked, had just done the impossible. They'd killed a Tiger head-on.
On the other side of the field, Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Becker of the 2nd Panzer Division pulled his headset tight. "Scheisse! That wasn't a normal Sherman," he barked into the intercom. Through the narrow slit of his Tiger's vision port, Becker saw the smoldering wreck of his comrade's tank, black smoke twisting into the blue Norman sky. For months, German crews had derided Allied tanks as inferior. The M4 Sherman was fast, yes, but lightly armored and weakly gunned. Becker and his man had faced them in Italy and North Africa, destroying them by the dozens. "A duel with a Sherman," one Tiger commander once said, "is like hunting rabbits with a rifle." But this was different. The shot that had killed the Tiger came from over 700 meters away, a distance at which a normal Sherman's 75mm gun might only scratch paint. Becker's gunner swore under his breath. "Herr Leutnant, das war ein anderer Typ. Different gun, longer barrel." Becker peered again through the periscope. In the hedgerow shadows, a silhouette emerged, familiar yet wrong. It was a Sherman, but with a monstrous cannon that looked absurdly long for its size. A Firefly. The German radio network erupted in panic. "Long-barreled Shermans, multiple units, they've got a new gun!" In a matter of days, word spread through the panzer divisions from Caen to Falaise. Allied tank crews were now fielding a weapon that could kill Tigers and Panthers before they even got within striking range. The 17-pounder, a British masterpiece of improvisation, had been jammed into the American M4 chassis by sheer necessity. Engineers at the Royal Armored Corps workshops had stripped internal storage, rotated ammunition racks, and even forced the radio into the turret bustle just to make room. It was cramped, awkward, and nearly deafening to fire inside. But the result? The Sherman Firefly gave the Allies the first real answer to German heavy armor. On June 12, 1944, near Tilly-sur-Sulud, another Firefly from the 24th Lancers caught a column of Panthers moving along a bocage lane. The lead Panther turned its turret too slowly. The Firefly fired once, a flash, a boom, and the Panther's turret flew off its ring in a fiery spiral. 2 more shells followed, igniting fuel lines and sending the remaining tanks scrambling for cover. Captured German tankers later admitted in interrogation that they were stunned. The Shermans they had laughed at were suddenly striking from beyond the range of their own 75mm guns. "We didn't believe the British could do that until we saw a Tiger burning from a mile away." The laughter had stopped, and as the British and Canadian armored brigades pressed inland from the beaches toward Caen, Fireflies became the hidden teeth of the Allied advance, deadly, silent, and patient among the hedgerows.
The morning mist hung low over the Norman fields, curling between hedgerows like smoke from invisible fires. Corporal Evans leaned out from the turret hatch, scanning through binoculars. "No movement, but they're out there," he muttered. The Firefly sat half-hidden beneath an apple tree, its long 17-pounder barrel camouflaged with burlap and branches. In the narrow lanes of Normandy, this gun was both a blessing and a curse. Its length made it difficult to maneuver, but when fired from ambush, it was death itself. Burkett's troop had learned quickly, survive by being unseen. The German tanks, the Panthers and Tigers, could shrug off hits from ordinary Shermans, but one shot from a Firefly could change the course of a skirmish. "Keep her still," Burkett whispered, pressing his earphones tight. Static crackled, followed by a voice. "Panthers approaching from the east. 2, no 3 vehicles." The loader, Private Mason, wiped his hands on a rag and loaded another 17-pounder APDS round. The gun's breech clanged shut with a metallic click. Inside the cramped turret, sweat and oil thickened the air. They waited and waited. Then, the faint rumble of engines. Through the sight, Evans caught a flash of movement, the sharp, sloped armor of a Panther tank rolling into the open field below. "Hold," Burkett ordered. The first Panther stopped to pivot, presenting its side armor. "Now!" The Firefly recoiled violently. A tongue of flame burst from its muzzle, the report echoing across the valley. The armor-piercing shell sliced through the side plate of the Panther like a hot knife through butter. Within seconds, the tank exploded, ammunition cooking off in a chain of thunderclaps. "Hit! Target destroyed!" The second Panther halted, confused. It fired blindly into the hedgerows. Dirt and leaves erupted around the Firefly, but the British crew had already reversed into cover. The Germans fired again, the shot sailing high over the orchard. "Reload!" Mason slammed another round in. Evans adjusted his aim, whispered, "Let's make it 2." Another flash, another kill. Word of the Firefly's success spread quickly through the British Army. The 11th Armored Division nicknamed them Tiger Killers. Each troop of Shermans now carried at least one Firefly, its long barrel immediately recognizable and often deliberately camouflaged to avoid drawing enemy fire. Crews painted the tips to resemble the shorter 75mm gun, hoping to fool German spotters for just a few seconds longer. On the German side, tank commanders began changing their tactics. Reports warned that Shermans with long guns could penetrate even the frontal armor of a Panther at range. "Do not underestimate, they strike before you see them," one Panzer battle log read. By late June, British Fireflies had claimed dozens of kills against the best tanks Hitler's armies could field. The men who had once laughed at the Sherman now watched in disbelief as Fireflies turned those jokes into smoke and fire. And for Sergeant Burkett and his crew, the war had changed. They were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters.
By mid-July 1944, the fields of Normandy were scorched and cratered, a landscape of shattered armor and burned-out farmhouses. The Allied advance toward Caen had become a brutal chess game, one where every hedgerow could hide death, and every plume of dust on the horizon meant another duel between men and machines. Inside his Tiger I, Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Becker wiped sweat from his brow. The air was suffocating, the engine's heat baking the steel shell that surrounded them. He listened as his gunner, Feldwebel Rausch, muttered into the optics. "Movement ahead. Sherman, maybe two." Becker smirked. They never learn. He had destroyed 4 Shermans this week alone. To him, their appearance was a promise, a brief flash of superiority before the inevitable kill. "Transverse left, elevation 500 meters." The Tiger's turret groaned as it turned. Through the scope, Becker saw a familiar shape, the rounded hull of a Sherman breaking through the hedgerow line. Easy prey. "Fire!" The 88mm roared, and a shell streaked across the field, striking the ground just short. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed high, but the Sherman didn't stop. "Missed! Adjust!" Before Becker could finish, Rausch froze. "Sir, that gun! It's longer!" A blinding flash erupted from the enemy tank. The Firefly's 17-pounder screamed across the valley and slammed straight through the Tiger's thick mantlet. The impact tore through the crew compartment, filling it with sparks, smoke, and screams. Becker was thrown back, his headset ripped away by the blast. He coughed, half blind, as the Tiger filled with choking black smoke. "Abandoned tank! Get out!" The crew stumbled into the mud, gasping for air, their proud machine burning behind them. Becker turned in disbelief. The Sherman, that Sherman, had done this. He stared at its long barrel silhouetted against the orange glow. "Gott im Himmel! They've changed the game," he whispered. Back in the British lines, Sergeant Burkett's Firefly crews celebrated quietly. 2 enemy tanks confirmed destroyed. No casualties. The loader, Mason, opened a tin of rations with shaking hands. "Never thought I'd see a Tiger back down." Burkett smiled faintly. "They're men, same as us, and they bleed like us when their steel fails." The Firefly had become a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. German intelligence reports now listed it among the most dangerous Allied threats. Tank crews were instructed to engage it first at all costs. But that fear had come too late. By August, as Operation Cobra and the Allied breakout began, Fireflies were spearheading the push across France. Their long barrels gleamed under the summer sun, a symbol of retribution, of lessons learned through blood. When the German retreat turned into a rout near the Falaise pocket, abandoned Panthers and Tigers littered the roads. Many bore the sharp, clean holes of 17-pounder shells. Precise, devastating, final. The Tommy Cookers that had once burned so easily were now lighting the way to victory.
August 1944. Outside the French town of Falaise, the smell of smoke and diesel hung thick over the valley. Charred wrecks lined the ditches, Panthers, Tigers, half-tracks, all twisted, gutted relics of the Wehrmacht's once proud panzer divisions. The battlefield was eerily quiet now, save for the buzzing of flies and the distant rumble of Allied supply convoys moving east. Sergeant Alan Burkett stood beside his Firefly, its armor scarred and streaked with soot. He brushed a hand across the hull where German shrapnel had gouged deep grooves into the metal. "You did well, girl," he said softly. The tank had survived more than a dozen engagements since Normandy. So had the crew. Barely. Corporal Evans, the gunner, sat on the turret, jawed cigarette hanging from his lip. "You know," he said, "I used to dream of driving a Tiger, big, invincible thing. Now I've seen enough of 'em burning to last a lifetime." Burkett chuckled, his voice hoarse. "Aye, funny how quickly heroes turn to ghosts." He looked across the field. In the haze, a group of German prisoners trudged past, hands raised, guarded by Canadian infantry.
Among them walked a tall officer with soot-blackened face and torn uniform, Oberlieutenant Karl-Heinz Becker. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Becker hesitated, gaze flicking to the long barrel of the Firefly parked beside Burkett. Recognition dawned. It was the same model that had destroyed his Tiger. He gave a slow nod, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement, a professional soldier's salute to another who had earned his respect. Burkett returned the gesture silently. In the weeks that followed, the legend of the Firefly spread across Allied lines. For many soldiers, it became a symbol of balance restored, of the moment the Allies could finally meet the German panzers on equal terms. It wasn't a perfect machine. Its cramped interior and exposed profile made it vulnerable in city fights, and its gun's massive flash often betrayed its position. But to every tank crew who'd faced the dreaded 88mm, it was salvation made of steel. German reports, once filled with scorn for the weak American Shermans, grew cautious. By autumn 1944, field manuals explicitly warned that enemy Sherman tanks with long barrels are capable of destroying Tigers and Panthers frontally at long range. The laughter had turned to fear. As the Allies pushed toward the Rhine, Fireflies rolled beside American Shermans and Canadian Cromwells, their 17-pounders blazing trails of fire across Europe. They were the hunter's answer to the hunter, the evolution born of desperation, ingenuity, and the grim arithmetic of war. For Sergeant Burkett and his men, each battle blurred into the next: Caen, Falaise, Eindhoven. Yet what lingered most were not the victories, but the silence after, when the smoke cleared and the once mighty Tigers lay still. War had stripped both sides of illusions. The Firefly, forged in necessity, had restored something deeper: respect. March 1945, on the outskirts of the Rhine. As dawn broke, Burkett's Firefly led the column across a pontoon bridge under gray skies. He looked back once more at his battered machine. Its name, scrawled in chalk on the turret, was almost rubbed away by months of rain. Hope. He smiled faintly. Not bad for a Tommy Cooker. The Firefly had done more than pierce armor. It had shattered arrogance, rewritten fear, and proved that even in war, innovation could turn weakness into strength. And somewhere behind them, in the ruins of Germany, men like Becker would remember the day they stopped laughing.